Hello, everyone. Welcome to TCAF 2021. My name is Faduma from the programming team at TCAF. You are all in for a treat as we dive into our panel for this evening titled Life into Comedy. Before we begin, the Toronto Comic Arts Festival would like to honor and acknowledge the original caretakers of this land, the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat peoples. We are in a territory that was the subject of the dish with one spoon, one palm belt covenant, an agreement between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, Haudenosaunee, and allied nations to share and care for the land. We also acknowledge that this area is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. TCAF makes this acknowledgement as a reminder that we are all treaty people and that we have a responsibility to the land and each other. This acknowledgement is a touchstone in our process of thinking through what it means to live and work on colonized land and is an expression of solidarity with our Indigenous siblings. TCAF commits to strengthening its relationship with Indigenous communities in Toronto and increasing Indigenous voices and perspectives in our programming. Thank you everyone for coming. Just a note, if you want to turn on closed captioning, you can turn it on by clicking on the screen at the bottom right corner. Welcome everyone to Life into Comedy. Life into Comedy addresses incorporating life experiences and presenting it in the comedy genre with a particular focus on the process of holding life events and producing comedy through sequential art. We are joined by Meichi Ng, Ananth, Hirsh, and Yuko Ota, Thom, and Shary Flenniken, and moderated by the one and only Boum. Thank you so much for joining us. The floor open to Boum, who will officially start this awesome panel for us. Take it away.
Thank you. Wow, what an intro. My name is Boum. I'm a cartoonist from Montreal, Canada. I am moderating this panel for the first time ever. I've never moderated anything before, and now my cat wants my water, so there's probably going to be cat appearances in this panel, just a warning. So I'm best known for my journal comic, which was a webcomic series called Boomeries, which is autobio and mostly about parenthood, because I had kids along the way. And recently they were picked up by a publisher in Quebec for this gorgeous omnibus that doesn't exist in English yet. But can you not play with my earrings? So that just came out this year, and I'm French only for now, so hopefully someday in English. And I'm working right now on a graphic novel that's all fiction. But this panel was not about me, so I'm gonna let the guests introduce themselves because they know better about their work and what they want to share and whatnot. So who wants to go first? Thom, you go first.
Okay.
You go first.
So my name is my full name is Thomas Leblanc, but my pen name is Thom. I'm a cartoonist. I mainly do comics for Pow Pow Press in Montreal, where I live, and I published two books. So the first one was published in 2017. It's called Seven. And my second one, which just came out this November, well, November 2020, is Casa Rodeo. And yeah, that's my work.
It's good work. We'll talk about it. Shary, you want to go next?
I will. I'm Shary Flenniken, and I live in Seattle. I've lived some other places, but I went to art school here. I was raised here in Seattle, and I went to art school, a commercial art school, which is not the same as art. They teach you things like how to do type. And yeah, and I had so much fun that I started working with people in an underground newspaper. They called them undergrounds. They were kind of like alternative newspapers. It was an anti-Vietnam War time and newspaper. And through that work, I met other cartoonists, and I ended up in San Francisco, which was having a real blossoming underground comic scene. And it was, hey, there was a lot more money in it then than there is now, because they had a great audience, because they sold in the head shops that were selling all the, you know, pot equipment and stuff. And there were so many of them. And when that folded, that whole economy kind of went in. But by that time, I had been invited to work for National Lampoon magazine, which was headquartered in New York, and had a really big readership. It was probably 500,000 when I started, and it went up to, it was pushing 1 million at one point before the religious right destroyed it. And so they asked me to do various comics, but I had a regular slot in the part of the book called the funny pages, where there were a lot of cartoonists who were given like a half page or a page to do. So every month I would turn in a strip, and it was a really great time because there was a lot of freedom there. And my funny pages strip has been collected in this book by New York Review of Comics in New York, and they're a great publisher. They're really neat, and they love comics. So, and my friend Norman Hathaway did everything. He did the deal, he designed the book, and I'm real happy with it. So that's my story.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Ananth and Yuko, you want to go next?
Oh,
Sure.
sure. So we got our start on the web posting comics at JohnnyWander.
JohnnyWander.com. We started working together in 2008.
Yeah. So this is a collection of our autobio comics. It came out, it came out a few years ago. It's like 400 pages long.
Yeah, this is like 7 years of autobio comics that we collaborated on.
And he covered a period of maybe close to 10 years, probably 7 or 8.
About 7 years.
7 years, okay. After that, we did Lucky Penny, which is a fiction
This
book.
is like a comedy romance comic.
The most recent autobio work we've done is Wander. These are travel comics. So anytime we would go anywhere, Yuko would do these diary comics. And we collected them all there. And then our current series is Barbarous, which we're currently putting on the web in these big oversized collections in full color. So that is.
And this is like a little bit less comedy, a little bit more drama, but there's still comedy in these. And you can read almost everything we've done at JohnnyWander.com, and you can pick up a whole bunch of like these 2 books at like major book retailers.
I don't know if anyone can tell from the screen, but the Johnny Wander compilation is called Our Cats Are More Famous Than Us, which is a great title. I love it too.
That was all Yuko,
I had to say it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So Meichi, you want to go?
Yeah, for sure. My name is Meichi. I'm also known as Barely Functional Adult. It's a webcomic that I started back in 2015 as a result of going to VanCap, which is sort of the Vancouver counterpart to TCAF, which is a great event. But yeah, so a couple of months ago, I got the opportunity to do my first book, which is Barely Functional Adult. It'll all make sense eventually. And it's been an awesome adventure. Wrote a couple of stories basically around therapy, friendship, friends, hanging out, and just kind of figuring out your place in the world. But super excited to be here and excited to chat.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so I'm going to start with the questions right away. I was wondering, looking at everybody's body of work, because I'm a cartoonist myself, and I've done a lot of autobio things, a lot of inspiration comes from things around me. Even when I'm writing fiction, I usually incorporate some of my own life into the characters that I write about. So I wanted to know, where do you guys usually get your inspiration for comics from? Where do you, where do you get your inspiration from? Anyone can talk. The first one who has an idea can talk.
Okay.
No.
You should call on people. You should
Yeah,
call-
just if you call on people, maybe it'll motivate
take
us.
the reins.
I'm gonna force you. Okay.
Just go around or around.
Let's go with Meichi first then, since she went last for.
Sure. So I get my ideas from just everyday life, usually more specifically conversations with friends, and just kind of general introspection that comes from having those conversations. For my comics specifically, I like to talk about things that you don't necessarily tell other people, but you might think about a lot, usually a lot of struggles. And those kind of topics just tend to pop up a lot more when you're speaking with friends or just hanging out.
Cool. Thom?
Yeah, for me, I'm sorry, I didn't really describe what my books and everything, but they're because I think it's kind of important to understand because they're very fantastic. They're like absurd fantasy stories. They take place in an imaginary world with anthropomorphic animals, but they're very much based on my the adventures and the events that that the characters are gonna go through are very much based on my personal anxieties, are very much based on issues that I used to have in the past, and that I decided to explore a bit more with these characters, with this imaginary world, and explore it a bit more with this with like visual metaphors. But it's still very engrossed in like things. I'm sorry, I'm losing my words, but I think that I'm trying to figure out that I'm trying to talk to myself with these stories. I think I'm trying to tell myself some things that are very deeply bottled up inside, and they just come out this way. And so yeah, that's pretty much where I get my inspiration from.
There's one character in your books that's a writer.
Yeah.
Is he the one that is you?
Well, kind of, yeah. Well, there's three characters. There's the rabbit that is the writer. There's a pig and a duck. There are three characters that are very much based on my personality, but I think the rabbit that is the writer, he's the vessel of all my defaults. He's the vessel of all the things that are bugging me. So he's mainly the star of the show. But so yeah, a lot of my anxieties, a lot of my, as I say, my issues are translated with him. Yeah.
Cool. We'll talk about the story side of your book later, so don't worry. Shary, you want to go next?
Sure. Well, having to meet deadlines for a long time, my writing is really very structured, but it starts like with what Thom's saying, where you're kind of looking into yourself and how you feel about things.
Yeah.
So I just sort of move from there and take the subject that I'm writing for. But the other thing that I do, show and tell. This is one of my notebooks. This is from 1974. And I would put this in my purse and copy what people were saying around me, which is really a good way to write stuff, is just to steal it from other people who were never going to write it themselves. And this is it says it's a waiter at the restaurant something, and it's a waiter in a restaurant just going like, I wish they'd shut up. So anyway, that's what that waiter was saying. So that's the kind of thing I do. I when I teach, I tell that's the first thing I tell the kids is find the funniest person you know and write down everything they say.
I love that.
It's so funny.
Yeah, that's great.
What about you guys?
I think, oh, you go ahead.
Yeah. For the autobio stuff, it tended that we tried to find things that were happening in our lives that were the most like relatable and also like sweetly relatable. Like the autobio stuff that we did was very much about like charm of life, especially because we were the protagonists. We wanted to present kind of like a arm's length view of our lives, because at our core we are both very private people. So like a lot of people didn't find out until the book published and like the full volume of like all of the comics published that we were actually a couple. Most people thought we were just roommates. Like that's how guarded we tended to be. But as we started moving away from autobiographical stuff and into more fiction stuff, we started pulling from other parts of our lives that we wanted to discuss in story, but didn't really want to be made about us. Like through the lens of a character was like a better way to like pick some things apart.
I think it had a lot to do with our comfort level, right?
Yeah.
I also would say that the original, like the autobio comics, it's like very charm of life, I think is a good way to put it. Slice of life comics, and they were really inspired by there's a manga, I think Yen Press does it now, called Yotsuba, which is about a dad and his little girl, and that feeling that we got kind of like reading that comic, I think that was a really strong inspiration for kind of like what I wanted to capture when we were writing it. But as we got away from that, we were able to get a little more honest, I think, about sort of I think it's, as you said, topics that we were not as comfortable talking about with our faces attached. We became more comfortable talking about through the lens of fiction. So it's been interesting to see, I guess, how we think about that, but then also like what is another cartoonist comfort level with that. Like I'm fascinated by just the different ways that people approach autobio comics. So
Me too. I'm my own, like I consume a lot of autobio, and I did some, but I read a lot of it. I still read a lot of it. I still love it. I think it might be my favorite thing. I don't know. Cool. Okay. So we've talked about incorporating, aspects of your life in the comics, even if they're not autobio. But where do you draw the line between what's real and what's not? Because I've been asked this question myself with my autobio, and I'd like to know what's what it is for you. And do you ever censor yourselves? And then I'm going to ask another question afterwards. So where do you draw the line between what's real and what's not when you're doing fiction? Like, do you, I'm not, my English is failing me. Okay. And do you ever censor yourselves? So Shary, can you go first?
I'm not sure I actually understand that question.
Okay, sorry.
But I'll tell you, I can tell you anyway that I've had people who stopped talking to me because I put them in my comic strip. Some people love it.
That kind of answers my question.
Actually, it was a boyfriend, and it was a very revealing strip. It was called The Millionaire and the Busboy. And the busboy stopped talking to me. So that was a drag. But some people just eat it up, and I put my people that I went to high school, I put their names in my comics.
Oh, they're real actual names.
They're
okay.
real actual names. In like, I did like one of a women's art show that was all just very, women's art, it's like all the flowers look like vaginas kind of thing. And I slapped my girlfriend's names on it. Never heard anything about it. I got away with it. So in the book.
Yeah, is the one about the boyfriend in the compilation?
No, that was in, there was Trots and Bonnie, which is in that comic strip. Sorry. And then I would do other stories that were printed there.
Yeah, I feel like we need to see this comic strip now.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'd really like to. There's a lot of them. And yeah. like to publish those.
Oh my gosh, dude, so brave.
Yeah, you're fearless. That's great.
Okay, so maybe I should try to say my question differently than for the others, but that did answer my question. Do you ever, when you do autobio, do you, or when you take from real life, do you ever feel the need to censor yourself sometimes? Like, oh, this is too much, I can't make a comic about it, or this is too much, I have to change the characters' names, or that kind of thing. That's a touchy subject because boyfriend's gonna hate you then. Has it ever happened to you?
Who should go? You want to go?
Yeah, I can go.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
for it.
good. Thom.
Yeah, well, I think that since my universe, my work is mostly like fantastical. It's very absurd. I actually don't have this feeling of there's something that I cannot tell, because pretty much everything that I talk about is by visual metaphors, is by dreamlike sequences. It's very absurd. So I think that I can talk about pretty much. I feel that I can talk about pretty much anything that is important to me. But it's still very personal stuff. I'm not gonna talk about someone or very specifically. So yeah, actually, I get a lot of freedom for that. I don't think there's a subject really that's too much for me right now. Maybe it's gonna come. Maybe it's gonna the day will come that I'm gonna say nope, no, I'm not gonna do that. But right now, I still have. I feel some liberty doing what I do.
Cool. Sorry, I was distracted by my cat. Who wants to go next? Meichi?
Go for it.
Yeah, I think that like when I write my stories, my primary focus is on the feelings as opposed to like the facts. So I'll try to convey the feelings of like being lost or like being heartbroken or whatever you're trying to write about without necessarily including details in terms of, or like factual details, that kind of stuff I play around with a bit. But I feel like what Shary said really resonated in the sense that it really depends on the person. Some people are really game to be made into a comic. Other people aren't so hot on it. And I think it's just like finding that balance from a person to person basis and just trying to have that. I don't really think it's censorship, but like, yeah, there is some pressure to kind of do a run through of your book before you hit publish.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Oh, I think for us, we tried to be as flattering as possible at all times with the autobio comics. There was one incident that happened where I put up a comic and I got I asked permission if I could do this, like really, it was like totally like incidental cute thing that happened. If I could make that into a comic. And then I got an email from the person that said, hey, can you change my haircut? And after that, I was like, okay, I have to like not put new people into this comic unless they've been absolutely vetted.
Yeah, I would say like you really don't like doing caricatures very much.
I hate doing caricatures of people. It pains me.
So for various reasons, we fell into doing autobio comics. It actually had more to do with sort of like the time we had available to us.
Yeah, I was doing so much freelance and like NDA work and like just like freelance illustrations on the side. And this is something simple that we thought that we'd have a lot of, we would be able to have the time for, that we'd be able to do twice a week.
Yeah, but I feel like complaining about how Yuko drew you in the comic was really like a kiss of death as far as like, were you going to show up in the comic again? Because you're nice, like you will go and change it, but after that you can't be bothered, and I think that's totally fair. I would say I don't know if I call it censoring so much as we would sometimes streamline things that happen. So like our jokes need to start and end on a page, and sometimes a bunch of other stuff happened between like the funny beginning and the funny end. And so we would just like kind of like streamline it in the middle. So sometimes they happen exactly as they happen in the comic on the page. but sometimes we definitely, I don't want to say like editorialized a bit, but basically made it narratively streamlined so that the joke hit clearly. So I guess that was more like a formal consideration than like a like are we censoring ourselves? Yeah. But yeah,
because it becomes, it goes from like you had to be there, and it turns into this is like universally relatable if you just like cut off the chaff.
Yeah.
I relate a lot. I have put both my children in my comic with their real names because you don't know, and that like you don't know if it's gonna work or not. And then at some point, I wasn't even there. My husband went to the park with both my children, and somebody was like, "Are you Boum's family?" I'm like, that's weird.
Wow.
Wow.
So this is part of why I stopped doing Rodeo. I might come back to it later, but so if you ever make a comic, like I'm talking to the audience in general, if you ever make a comic about your life and there's children, then don't put their real names. Just don't. Okay, next question. Some of the subjects you talk about that are harsher, like grief, war, aging, ostracism, even Barbarous, which is more serious in tone, has frequent comedy elements. You talked about it earlier, that it has some comedy in it. What attracted you all into writing the comedy genre? And why did you choose comedy to talk about these subject matters? Shary?
Number one, I can't help it.
It's fine.
And I don't know. The first time one of my peers laughed at me, I must have been 11 or 12 years old. It felt good. There was some sort of affirmation in having somebody think what I said was funny, because my family laughed at me from the age I was 2 years old, and I fell butt first into a toilet on a ship on the way to Alaska. And my family all gathered around and just laughed at me while I was struggling. And that's like, I'm like, this is my life. This is how it's going to work out from here.
Meichi?
I think that like I see comedy as like a bit of a vessel that you can sneak people in to get them to like darker places that they wouldn't necessarily sign up for normally. And I think it acts like as a bit of a security blanket. And like just personally, I really like dark comedy. I think that if I was to watch a strictly dark show or a strictly dark book, I wouldn't necessarily jump into it. But when there's like a comedic element, there's some sort of safety and comfort that you're kind of guaranteed. So I feel like Shary said, I don't think it's intentional. I didn't like sit down and decide I'm going to write things that are supposedly funny. But I think it just comes along for the ride. And I think that it is beneficial in the sense that you can kind of dive into a bit more discomforting topics without kind of changing the tone of the story. So that's been helpful.
I think it's the same thing for me too, particularly with what you were saying, Shary, about it. Just that's what it came to be, because the first time that I did my first comic, it was funny. It was always going to be funny, and I didn't really think about it. And yeah, when you get your first laugh, when you manage to get someone to laugh, I think it's the best feeling in the world. And also, I don't think I could talk about what I'm talking about in my stories without humor, like you were saying, Meichi. Like there's some things that I think are more easily translated with humor, I think. And you can explore a bit more things with humor. Well, that's the feeling that I have with my work, I think.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, I like coming from humor into drama that's peppered with humor. I definitely think that drama is more like harder, heavier stories are more palatable with comedy in it. And going from a comic that was every joke had to take place in a single page to a long format story. I think that it's so gratifying to put humor into a long format story because the jokes can be so much more complex. They're based off of like a long time of characterization. And I feel like they become really organic when you are able to see a character grow and then make something that, if you have to be able to see the entire arc of narrative to be able to understand. I think that like that high context humor of characterization is like really fun. It's like you had to be there.
You feel like it's satisfying?
Yeah, where we talked before about how you take a situation, you cut it down to a page and you cut out the chaff because it has to be palatable. You add on the chaff like with like a long format story, and it becomes even funnier because it becomes almost an inside joke between you and the audience. I love that.
And you can do fun things like escalate a joke, which is something that we historically were not able to do. I think my answer is pretty short. I completely agree with Shary. Getting that laugh out of someone just feels so good, you know. I can't remember the first time that it happened, but at some point I realized I was just getting like serotonin or whatever that chemical is every time I made someone laugh or someone flipped through our comics and laughs, and I was like, oh, this is great, you know. I could do this forever. So yeah.
And I think for me also, it's the feeling is so satisfying that I would make like my comic and I would make it read to my friends, and if I don't have a laugh, I just redo the whole thing. Not satisfied. Yeah. I'm not happy. There wasn't a laugh. Okay, scrap that. I'm doing a new story.
Okay, I have now personal questions, like for each one of you. Hopefully we're going to have enough time at least to do one for everybody. My first question is for Shary Flenniken. So Trots and Bonnie, if people in the audience don't know, is a comic that ran from the 70s to 90s in the National Lampoon, as Shary said at the beginning. But it talks about modern issues still relevant today, like feminism, sex, puberty, abortion, contraception. It doesn't look like it from the cover, but believe me, it doesn't hold back, and it's great. And thank you to
that was going to be a vasectomy actually on the cover.
Oh yeah, in the comic, yeah, what's on the cover?
That was birth control.
And my cat's hiding my screen. Considering National Lampoon's target audience was young adult men, how much freedom were you initially given to tackle these subjects? I love that you do some educational bits about contraception and abortion and these kind of things, but how was it hard, like at the time, or not? They just let you do your thing?
Yes, they did.
Awesome.
They did. I mean,
that's great.
But you know where I was coming from in underground comics in San Francisco. I mean, Michel Chiquette, who's from Montreal, was doing a book, and he recruited people in San Francisco to be in this book. And inappropriate humor is what we're talking about. Okay. And there was a enormous freedom in San Francisco. I mean, and a lot of it was like, there were guys there that were like S. Clay Wilson, who really were doing a lot of like stabbing and blood, and Robert Crumb, who was doing, you know, his version of like pretty gross out comics and stuff. So coming from that, I think that the editors, the art director and the editors at Lampoon wanted to give people like me, because there were other people who were doing really interesting, you know, freedom loving stuff too. So I think they just accepted it, and they knew that was the package that they had bought with somebody awesome. who was going to do that stuff, and I just milked it for all it was worth, you know. And I mean, that's what we were thinking about, was abortion and birth control and you know, eating the placentas at a birth, you know. And it was just, that was what was going on. And so that's what appeared there. And it kind of, I think of it now like, oh, look at me, I educated all those little boys, you know. That wasn't what I was thinking at the time.
But whatever works, right? You did, probably.
Were you just having fun?
That was a lot of fun.
You're just
Yeah.
having fun. That's cool.
It was
That's
Wow.
cool.
Yeah, it was a blessing, you know, to be able to do it.
Really. Wow.
Very cool.
Meichi, your book, Barely Functional Adult, is based on the comics you've been posting on your Instagram. That's how you've started your webcomic, I think, on Instagram.
Correct.
And the book is some sort of hybrid, and it contains both short comics and illustrations and pages with text. Why did you choose this format? It's super interesting and gets really personal, but I wanted to know the thinking behind that.
I mean, I think it goes back to what we kind of already touched upon about long form content. I feel like on Instagram, it's great for many things, but it's not necessarily a place where people have a lot of attention span. It's not necessarily a place where people have the mood to sit down and kind of like consume a book. And that context is very, like, it does have an impact on what you can share and what does well and what people resonate with. So when I was able to write like the book, it was awesome because I could finally tell stories that dove deeper, right? Like it went from doing like, here, tell a joke in like a 1-2 punch to like, let's wander around this topic about, let's talk about what it feels like to have like imposter syndrome and to have those moments of like sitting with a feeling. And you get to, I feel like it's just a lot nicer, honestly, a lot nicer for writers and creators, just because you have the space to tell stories the way you want to. And you can kind of dive into a bit more content than you would as opposed to Instagram. I think just in general, like for me, I ended up writing like 8 short stories and it was like 1 theme per chapter. And I picked that format because I felt like people are time poor and they don't necessarily have the time to sit through a book or binge through a book as much as I would like them to. So I wanted to build something that was more like a nightstand book that they could read, have that one independent story, and then have that sense of closure, and then repeat. So it was awesome.
It's really smart.
It's a great book. I had a lot of fun reading it, and I love the comics are great also, but the text, because they dove into like more detail, like you said. It was really an interesting read. I really liked it, and that's how I discovered your work, actually.
Thank you.
And now I wanted to do the 2 of you together because Thom's books are silent books. They contain no text except for a few sound effects. Thom, your book, I guess in English would be Casa Rodeo, is about grief and finding one's place in the world. And yet it is full of slapstick and humor. And so why did you go for a silent format? Does it come naturally for you? Do you see it as a challenge? It's a thick book. Like imagine 2 like graphic novels without text in them, like almost ever. It's crazy.
Well, actually, it's actually my first comic. I was supposed to have dialogues in it. I wanted to make a comic with dialogues, but I didn't like what I was writing. I thought the dialogues were not good. Every time that I would write something, the characters were already saying it with their body language or with their expression, with their facial expressions. So actually, when I decided to just do a silent comic, it was so freeing. I just, oh, no dialogues. Oh, yes, thank you. I was so happy because I actually forgot that I used to watch like old silent films like Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and more recent with Sylvain Chomet with
Triplets of Belleville.
de Belleville, which are so, they're very funny, and I kind of forgot that I love this kind of humor. I love this kind of comedy, the slapstick, the physical comedy, the timing that they would have. I loved it, and I just I started to go back to these old films and especially cartoons, like old silent cartoons. And they ended up inspiring me to make my own like toolbox of references of, well, how does this character move? How does this character, what are the facial expressions of this character? How does he speak? Well, by movement. So yeah, it was a challenge, but it's always fun. It's like a challenge that keeps on giving me good feelings, because it's so I, I I think I discovered that it's really much the way that I can that I can communicate. I don't communicate well with words, and I don't know. It comes easier to me by movement, I think, and it was a bit of a revelation that I could do that, and yeah, yes.
And you can do it well.
Thank you. I hope.
No, you do. And Ananth and Yuko, being the only writer-artist team on this panel, can you explain to us what your workflow is like? How do you write? Do you do it together? And then does Ananth say anything about the paneling and that kind of thing?
Do you want to?
No, you should start.
Oh, so we share a home office. So we're actually on like my side of the office right now, but we have a big bookshelf full of books, and on the opposite side is Yuko's desk. So we work in the same room, but we're separate. But if we need something, we can yell at each other. And I would say for most of the process, we're kind of just in each other's business a little bit. Like we'll spend most of our day at our desk, but every once in a while, one of us will ask the other one to come over and read something or look at something. So Yuko will have a lot of input on the writing.
And Ananth has a lot of input on the art and like the thumbnailing and the pacing.
And I think one of the things we make an effort for is, I think that sometimes when there's a writer-artist duo, there can be a disconnect between the writing and the art. And one of the things that we try really hard to do is make the comics seem very fluid, so you don't think about that divide. And so we're constantly trying to figure out new ways to kind of like communicate ideas to each other. And so, for instance, one of the things that I did recently was we both discovered Clip Studio has 3D models, and these are actually pretty useful for thumbnailing. And so I trained up on the 3D models for Clip Studio, so that every once in a while, if I, like sometimes you can describe a scene, especially if it's an action scene, you can try to describe it, but it doesn't necessarily come through very well. And I'm not quite an artist, so if I try to draw the thumbnail out, it doesn't quite work. But with 3D models, it becomes pretty simple to sort of like just pose the figure, and then you can visualize the scene, and then you can even do interesting things like move around in perspective. So yeah, we're just trying to find tools like that. I would say even like when we get to the design and production. So originally I was a designer, and so I do all the design and production on our books. And so even at that stage, when we're putting a book together to send to a printer, Yuko will come over to my desk and have a lot of input. So
yeah, and Ananth has actually done the print design on almost all of our books. So like any copy of Penny that you find, Ananth was the guy who did it. If you pick up Barbarous, Ananth was the guy who did those books.
Yeah, I think we just all to say it's like a pretty fluid process, though.
Yeah, and God, we've been working like this for over 10 years, so I think it comes very naturally for us. It's really, really unusual, but I think that because we have been living together for such a long time, and we've always essentially worked in the same space, it fees very natural for us. It's definitely not recommended. This is like very like high tier collaboration. So
it takes a lot of compartmentalization, I think, but yeah, I think it works for us. So
yeah, but in that way, we don't usually consider ourselves to be like a writer and an artist. We're more like collaborators and co-creators.
Makes sense. I was asking because some writers like to just like give the script to the artist, like, oh, you do your thing, right? Some artists want to have the freedom, and some other artists would rather get like be guided through the process. So no, I'd rather have the writer do the paneling, like, oh, at page 1 that's this number of panels, and some other writers just write scripts as almost prose, you know, just like, oh, it's a text, you do whatever you want.
So we have actually worked with other artists before, J.R. Doyle and Tess Stone on like various books, and I would say even there the collaborative process is pretty close. It's not quite as like looking over each other's shoulder as it is here, but you know, we'll be talking in Discord and stuff and checking in with each other pretty frequently. I think it's just a mode of like collaboration that works for us and the people that we sort of naturally gravitated towards working with. So. Yeah.
Cool. I have more questions, but we're kind of nearing the end, and I was wondering if the audience had any questions for like a Q&A at the end. But if no one has questions, I'm well prepared to to have you guys talk until 9. So I'm gonna just turn the chat on. Hopefully, if I can find it more.
Yeah, there are two questions in the Q&A and 21 comments in the chat.
Yeah, they were asking about links or ways to buy your book. I can't see his Q&A tab at the bottom. You can see it? I can't.
You want to hear a question?
Okay. So we have one question. When your autobio comics are mostly upbeat and fun, I'm guessing this might be for Yuko and Ananth, but maybe Shary too. When your autobio comics are mostly upbeat and fun, how do you insert serious things like tragedy or trauma without sacrificing the air of the whole project?
I think we didn't basically.
Yeah,
like,
we put that in our pocket and we didn't discuss in the auto bio.
Yeah, we just, you know, like I think naturally everybody in life goes through difficult periods, and we definitely went through, you know, like crazy life stuff. But yeah, I'd say we put it in our pocket, and we're kind of feeding it into the fiction, where it's like a little easier for us to like, what do you call it? Translate it, I guess, onto the page. So
yeah.
My stuff's all about death and terrible things happening to people.
There's one character that repeatedly dies. Kind of. One of your characters repeatedly dies.
Oh yeah, Elrod. Yeah, he's the perpetual victim. Yeah.
Oh,
they just kill him in a lot of different ways.
I can also.
Life is hard.
I can also sort of answer the question, because right now the fiction I'm writing is based on. I have troubles with my eye. I'm currently blind in this eye. And the fiction I'm writing right now, or drawing, because I'm doing the actual pages, is about vision problems, but it's not autobio. I invented the character and set up a whole life for that character. And the publisher I signed with wanted to know why I didn't want to go autobio. And I was like, well, it's too sad, and just a bunch of hospital stories. That's gonna be boring and kind of like. I'd rather build translate into somebody else's life and not have it about me. So more questions.
Yeah, I feel like for us, like a lot of bummer stuff that we've kind of wound up like drip feeding into other stories. It's so much more fun when it's a story about like magic and like monster people. I would rather read about the monster people dealing with the annoying stuff that we've had to deal in our lives than have to like write a story about us and our boring cartoonist lives wearing our faces, having to deal with bummer stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's so much. Well, yeah, like you said, it's so much more fun to tell these stories in these actual problems that you have in a fantastical way, that takes place in a magical place that anything can happen. You get, I don't know, you get so much freedom, and you can say, yeah, I can laugh at that because it's not me, it's the other person. It's okay to make them live through this thing, I think.
I have a question here. Did you ever make a comic part or a comic that you didn't think was super funny, but everyone else thought it was hilarious?
Huh.
Or the opposite, I guess, would work too. Like, I really like this comic, and then you put it online, and then, or
Oh,
in a book.
definitely that. Yeah. I can't name a particular one, but that your second example, I think.
Yeah,
I'm sure
I mean,
definitely
there
has happened.
definitely been both, because I feel like there were a bunch of like whiffs that we did where like I thought that they were misses, and then we put them online and people love them. I was like, really? Okay, well, thank you. I'm not going to say anything about this.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's
I don't specifically remember any. These are comics a long time ago.
And then you make one that's like, oh, this one is really good. I really like it. And then it just goes like silent treatment.
Crickets.
Yeah.
I think it's the opposite for me, because I often do like there's a lot of slapstick in what I do. So there's a lot of silly jokes and something that just makes me laugh. And every time, sometimes I just show it to my family or my friends, and they just, nope, okay. And I say, all right, let's, and I'm always trying to get the good joke.
Shary, someone's asking who or what was the inspiration for Elrod?
I shot him, or well, my character shot him after they kidnapped him. And it was a strip about, you guys maybe don't know about Patty Hearst, the heiress of the newspaper heiress who was kidnapped. It was a big deal, in the 70s. And my feeling was that it was really stupid for a revolutionary group to kidnap a woman, because females, are a class of vulnerable people. I think that actually. And so I felt it was politically incorrect for them to kidnap a woman. So my strip was about kidnapping a child and then having it go wrong. And I was trying to express the idea that I just explained to you not very well. So that's what it was about. And I did that. And then other opportunities came up to bring Elrod back. Another strip I did was about the death penalty. And in that one, I was talking about the death penalty and how wrong it was. And they put him in a swimming pool with a toaster. So these are not real children. They're avatars. No reason to feel bad about them.
There's a question here that's, how do you deal with people creating a parasocial relationship? I think that's what it's called, because they feel they know you in such a personal way because they read your comics. So I guess this goes for Yuko and Ananth, and maybe Meichi. I'm guessing people think barely functional adult is autobio, even though you say it's not, because that's not you. The main character is not you. But do you feel like your readers feel like they know you personally?
Yeah, I think that happens a lot, but also as like a reader, I get that sense from authors that I read. So I feel like that I see it as like a compliment. I've never had any like real troubles with it, but like it just means that you made a connection, right? So, and because I'm on the other side of that as like a reader, so I kind of feel like, it goes along with the book. It's something that happens, and it's a good thing in my sense.
Yeah, for us, I think that we've mostly had positive like interactions with people who feel like they know us or have like a personal relationship with us. It just makes me feel kind of bummed because we will meet people and they have this pre-existing relationship with us because they have experienced so much of our lives, and we have nothing to give back because it doesn't go both ways. It feels bad for us. We have had a couple of inappropriate like interactions, but by and large they're really rare. I feel very blessed in that way because I do know a lot of people who have had just really weird horror stories happen to them. But I think that also is partially because of the way that we manage our social media, where we've kind of pulled back on it. So you only really get that through our comics now.
Yeah, I think showing up to a place where like you knew half the people and you didn't know half the people, and everyone already knowing all your stories or whatever was like something that took some getting used to. I think it was just a weird thing, and it sounds like a small thing, but yeah, it's just like telling stories or having conversations how you connect with someone, or at least it's how I would connect to someone, and not being able to do that, it's just something very strange to get used to. Yeah, but overall I think we had like a pretty positive relationship with our readership.
I do have to say the best thing that ever happened regarding people recognizing us and like being able to see the like very simple caricatures that I drew of the two of us and then seeing us on the street was somebody approached us while we were out with my parents who didn't really necessarily think that I was doing a real job.
It was only your dad.
Yeah.
But your
my dad was always the hardest to convince that I was doing like I was like pursuing a real career, because he's a very conservative Japanese man. and we were wandering around the NYU area, and somebody came up off the street and was like, "Hey, I read your comics. I'm a big fan. I read everything you do." I was like, Dad, look at this.
So
see, Dad.
He was impressed one time.
Yes.
That's awesome. We have like 2 minutes left, so I'm just going to take this time to thank you all, and that it was very, very interesting to chat with you. I hope you had fun, and I found all of your stories very relatable and very educational too. I hope everybody in the audience enjoyed as well. I think the TCAF staff is sharing links to everybody's work in the chat, so everybody has books to buy available for purchase, and you can all find us online. I don't know if you want to, there's only 1 minute left, so there's we were on social media, just Google us. You'll find us.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Boum. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to Boum, Shary, Yuko Ota, Ananth, Hirsh, Thom, and Meichi, and all the attendees for tuning in. It's really interesting to see the many different ways that you all get to engage with comedy as a catalyst for effective storytelling, and in comics at that. So thank you for that. TCAF is brought to you in part by Seneca College School of Creative Arts and Animation. Special thanks to the Beguiling Books and Art page and panel, the TCAF shop, with government support from Canada Council of the Arts, Ontario Art Council, Toronto Art Council as well. So on Saturday, May 15th at 1 p.m., you can check out this panel, Kids Like Me. So in this panel, we get to discuss the genuine representation of BIPOC storytellers and characters. What happens when BIPOC characters and their stories are centered in comics? How does the existence of these narratives impact young BIPOC readers? So we're going to be joined by Jen Storm, Yehudi Mercado, Jennifer Haynes, and it's going to be moderated by Jay Torres. So great stuff. Also check out our online marketplace to get your hands on all the wonderful comics and art from our amazing lineup of creators. Looking for your favorite artists, we have a pretty rad list of exhibitors to navigate on our website, so check that out. Some links have also been posted in the chat, so check out everyone in this panel's work, which is super brilliant. Thank you, everyone, and happy TCAF.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for having us.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for coming.
Great. Yeah,
Good job, Boum.
Thank
job,
you.
Thom.
You did good. You were great.
Take care of us.
Yeah.